I want to tell you his story. When his wife died of COVID, John and his family obeyed the Prime Minister's rules. He didn't see her in hospital. He didn't hold her hand as she died. Their daughters and grandchildren drove 100 miles up the motorway, clutching a letter from the funeral director in case they were questioned by the police. They didn't have a service in the church. John's son-in-law stayed away because he would have been the forbidden seventh mourner. Doesn't the Prime Minister realise that John would have given the world to hold his dying wife's hand, even if it was just for 9 minutes? But he didn't, because he followed the Prime Minister's rules. Rules that we now know the Prime Minister blithely, repeatedly and deliberately ignored. After months of insulting excuses, today's half-hearted apology will never be enough for John Robinson. If the Prime Minister had any respect for John and the millions like him who sacrificed everything to follow the rules, he'd resign. But he won't, because he doesn't respect John. He doesn't respect the sacrifice of the British public. He is a man without shame. Looking past the member for Lichfield and the nodding dogs in the Cabinet, there are many decent, honourable members on the benches opposite who do respect John Robinson, who do respect the British public. They know the damage the Prime Minister is...
Starmer thought he could keep it hidden, that the cameras were off and that the doors were closed. But he was wrong, dead wrong. The footage is real. The whispers are growing louder. And now Sir Keir Starmer, the man who sold himself as Mr. Integrity, is facing the most devastating scandal of his political life. Caught in a secret CCTV video exposed by comedian Jim Davidson, he was abandoned by his wife in front of stunned witnesses. This isn't just a political crisis, this is a personal collapse, a party unravelling and a nation waking up. The media won't touch it, but Labour is in meltdown, and the public is demanding answers, demanding Starmer's resignation. Interestingly, the more Starmer and Labour try to bury it, the more it spreads, because the truth is out and there's no going back. It all began as just another quiet evening in Westminster's elite circle.
And for some reason, even though she was nowhere to be seen during the run-up to the election, Keir Starmer's taken Mrs Starmer, Victoria Starmer, who's said to be a very private person, not really interested in politics. Oh, isn't that funny? Now that they're going to Washington, she's very interested in politics. I'm just asking the question, why on earth is he taking the missus? It's a work trip. What's she going to tell the NATO bosses? Is she going to say, oh yeah, I work in the NHS, I come from an NHS family, you know, I'm a very clever woman, I'm coming with Sir Keir Starmer because he never leaves my side? It's all a bit weird, isn't it?
Another late-night comedy set, private invitations only, the kind of place where the powerful laugh behind closed doors, shielded from the public they claim to serve. But that night, something slipped. Jim Davidson, a man who's seen too much and has too little left to lose, took the stage. What he said stunned the room into silence. No jokes, no punchlines, just a confession. He'd seen the CCTV footage taken from Lord Wahed Ali's private office.
Now, if your position is that, well, these things happen and we should be thoughtful and flexible in our response, that's fine. But if, like Keir Starmer, you have been really aggressive in your criticism of Conservatives for this, then you've got to make sure that you are totally above reproach. And he has failed to do that. And so I think it's absolutely legitimate that we point out the hypocrisy of someone who basically got his job by criticising others for what he is now doing.
That's all a bit strong. When you say exactly this, you're not comparing the failure to declare some closed with Partygate or Matt Hancock's behaviour or Tractorgate, are you? You're not seriously saying this is in the same category of transgression.
So the point is, Keir Starmer has said over and over again that, you know, there is no flexibility, this is what you have to do, And he's failed to do it. And we are highlighting his hypocrisy, which I think is now showing a pattern of behaviour, the disregard he has got when we look at the
hypocrisy or just incompetence. There's another explanation, which is incompetence on the part of somebody in his office.
Neither of which is a good look when you're seeking to run the country. So this is not just a one-off. We have got donors hosting, indeed, the same donor, holding a pass to Downing Street for no particular reason, organising thank you parties on the government estate. We've got people running around the Department of Health, lobbyists who make money from understanding the inner workings of government, running around the department without a pass.
You're referring to the former Health Secretary, Alan Milburn.
A whole load of other donors and supporters getting
I think
getting
you would
passes.
contest that description, by the way.
Getting passes as clearly a thank you. And the Labour government have been very critical of us, and we can discuss how valid those criticisms are, but this hypocrisy is being felt. It's being brought up with me when I knock on doors.
And in that footage, Sir Keir Starmer was not at a meeting, not shaking hands, but allegedly in a compromising position with Lord Ali himself. The kind of scene that doesn't just end marriages, it ends careers. Davidson didn't hesitate. He named names, he described what he saw in graphic detail, and he didn't laugh. For once, people thought he was joking. They wanted it to be a joke, but it wasn't. Within hours, whispers turned to texts, and texts became screenshots. Soon, screenshots became leaks, and suddenly all of Westminster was buzzing. The Labour leader, the man who built his image on clean politics and moral superiority, was now at the heart of a scandal darker and dirtier than anything we've seen in years.
I think if anyone in the Labour Party needed a couple of £100 from Lord Ali, it's David Lammy to get some new shoes. The black training shoes he went over to America in, where I thought was a disgrace. I think Nigel's right. I think it's a terrible look. It doesn't matter. It's just an awful look. He's taken 300 knicker off nearly 1 million pensioners this winter. And I'm sure that his glasses were more than 300 knicker. I'm sure that his wife's outfit were more than 300 quid. I just think it looks terrible, whether he's followed the protocol to the letter or whether he hasn't.
He hasn't.
It's awful.
Let's listen to David Lammy trying to defend him earlier today.
In our country, there isn't a budget for the Prime Minister's clothes or his wife's. I've just come back from America, where there is a substantial budget to ensure that the US President and the First Lady, their appearance can never be challenged. That is not the case in our country.
Oh, right, so 93 grand and all the benefits isn't enough to buy your own clothes. Really? I mean, whilst taking money from pensioners, and those with the broadest shoulders should carry the heaviest burden. That's what they've said. But yet there they are.
That excuse just doesn't hold any water. And also, GB News played an earlier clip where Mr Lammy was saying that Lord Ali is self-made. So what?
I heard that,
What's that got to do with the fact that a multi-millionaire is throwing cash at the Prime Minister's wardrobe, his wife's wardrobe, and at the Prime Minister's eye furniture, and the Prime Minister's decent suits? I'm not going to say Savile Row. I don't know where he gets them made. But if they are tailored suits, they're not off the peg at Marks and Spencer's. And you can look smart in a £250 Marks and Spencer's suit. It doesn't have to be £2,500.
Well, they've got a lot of money and they get paid well. He's minted. Subsidised bars. He's already a millionaire.
And it wasn't just talk. Victoria Starmer, Keir Starmer's wife of over 15 years, reportedly received a copy of the clip while attending a charity gala. Witnesses reported that her hands trembled as she watched. Then she dropped her glass before crying. Then she left. No goodbye, no explanations, just gone. By morning, she had cleared out of their family home. By noon, divorce lawyers were already making calls, and by evening, the headlines should have been everywhere. But they weren't, because the mainstream media, such as BBC and Sky News, stayed silent. Even The Guardian pretended nothing happened. It looked like a coordinated blackout, as though they'd all been handed the same memo saying, protect Starmer at all costs, deny the truth. But truth doesn't stay buried in this age of social media, or when insiders are angry, and certainly not when the public is watching, because people are watching now in record numbers, searching, sharing and demanding answers. But the £1 billion question is, what was Starmer doing in Lord Ali's private office that night? Why was there no security log? Why was the meeting never declared? And why has no one from Labour addressed the footage, not even to deny it directly? Instead, they have gone into full-blown panic mode. First, they've begun issuing cease and desist letters to online platforms threatening legal action. Then, they're trying to erase every trace of the footage and every post about the leak. They are even saying it's fake and calling it a political smear campaign. But here's the problem with that. Jim Davidson isn't backing down, he's doubling down. In a fiery podcast interview just days after his onstage revelation, Davidson stood firm and declared, "I know what I saw and it made me physically sick." He's not apologising, nor walking it back. And that has Labour terrified, because this is no longer just about an alleged affair. It's about power, influence and the millions of pounds Lord Ali has funneled into Starmer's Labour Party. But Labour's biggest fear is if what Davidson saw is true, then what we're looking at isn't just a betrayal of trust. It's evidence of a quid pro quo relationship at the highest level of British politics. This kind of revelation destroys public faith and topples leaders. And here's what makes it worse. This isn't a one-off meeting. According to sources inside Westminster, Starmer and Lord Ali have been holding late-night, undocumented meetings for months. No staff, no press, no minutes, nothing but whispers, money changing hands and political favours wrapped in friendship. Perhaps something more. Some insiders are already calling this the beginning of the end. Frankly, they might be right, because as the footage continues to circulate in private circles and between journalists, MPs and insiders, more and more people are breaking ranks. 3 Labour MPs who've asked to remain anonymous told us they're ashamed and feel betrayed. One even said he had to go and that there was no coming back from this. But Starmer is digging in his heels. His team is calling it baseless gossip, his lawyers are calling it defamatory fiction, and yet nobody is showing the footage. Interestingly, nobody is denying the meeting ever happened. Nobody is answering the real questions. And that silence speaks louder than words. Because if you're truly innocent, why hide? Why threaten? Why run? This scandal didn't come out of nowhere. It's been building quietly under the radar for months, maybe even years. The timeline is suspicious. Records show that in the past 18 months alone, Starmer has met with Lord Ali on at least a dozen separate occasions, none of which were publicly declared. So, no press releases, no official calendar entries, no paper trail. But insiders in Labour HQ confirm that these meetings happened, always after hours, always in private locations, and always with strict instructions not to discuss them externally. Why, and what were they hiding? We don't have all the answers. But we can tell you where this relationship began. We are talking about the very structure behind Keir Starmer's rise to power. Starting from the moment Starmer began positioning himself as Jeremy Corbyn's clean-cut replacement, Lord Ali was there not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. He's been working the levers of influence, organising donor dinners, rallying corporate backers, and quietly shaping the image of a man who was supposed to be above reproach. But what if it was all a lie? What if Keir Starmer's so-called integrity was nothing more than a carefully manufactured illusion, funded and controlled by men like Lord Ali? Because now, with the CCTV footage casting a harsh light on their relationship, those quiet meetings start to look a lot more like transactions. So the secrecy makes sense, because if you're exchanging influence for power, favours for funding, you don't leave a trail. Instead, you meet in person, avoid email and keep the circle tight. Also, if that's the game they've been playing, then it's not just a personal scandal, it's a political crime. This is what the mainstream media refuses to confront. They're pretending this is about a salacious rumour from a disgruntled comedian and an overblown gossip story. But that's exactly what Starmer's team wants you to believe. They want you distracted by the drama, so you won't ask the real questions like, what was Lord Ali getting in return for his... Is it policy influence? Control over appointments, access to intelligence, or something even darker. Something that would explain why Starmer was willing to risk his marriage, his party, and his entire public image for a man most voters have never even heard of in the first place. But it gets crazier. Some members of Labour's Finance Committee have quietly begun leaking documents and internal reports that show a sharp rise in anonymous donations funneled through shell groups closely tied to Lord Ali's network. Shockingly, the money came fast, often, and it always arrived just in time. Right before major policy shifts, right before Starmer makes decisions that baffle his traditional base. For instance, before his sudden shift away from public ownership and his backtracking on green investment. It all starts to make sense when you follow the money. Obviously, Lord Ali's interests aren't in line with ordinary working-class Brits, so that is why the Labour government has failed to keep most of its promises to working-class citizens. If this conspiracy becomes public knowledge, Starmer and the Labour Party are in danger of losing their hold on power. If you enjoyed this political firestorm, like the video and subscribe to the channel for more interesting political content.